have the idea of rights. Rights are inherent. They are a part of you, and you don't have to ask. I want to go through the Bill of Rights. Who can tell me what the first... Anybody here be able to recite the First Amendment for me? Another group of good patriotic Americans. Okay? I expect all of you to memorize the Bill of Rights. I really, really do. Go home, open it up, memorize the Bill of Rights so that you can say it word for word. That will help you in times of stress. When the police officer says, well, we're going to, take your car and impound it. I go, well, no, you're not either. Fifth Amendment says you cannot deprive me of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And unless you are the judge, jury, and executioner, this little roadside chat doesn't constitute due process of law. Now, does it? It really helps. So, First Amendment. Congress shall make no law. Oh, that they had just put a period and were done. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. What was the religion in England?
Anglican
Church. Church of England. What were the others? There were no others. You were either a member of the Church of England or you were a heretic. You believe in the Church of England, don't you? Get the rope. Does that sound like freedom of religion? Freedom of expression? No. In fact, William Penn was a Quaker. He was actually accused of heresy because you're a Quaker. Yeah, I'm a Quaker. Okay, guilty, just confessed. And the jury refused to convict him. In fact, the judge put the jury in jail. No food, no water, and no facilities for 7 days. And the jury still refused to convict William Penn. And that is basically the essence of our jury system. The purpose of the first part of that clause is to prevent the official religion of the United States. Now, if I put a copy of the Ten Commandments in a justice building, does that establish an official religion? Does that prevent you from being another religion?
No.
No. So technically, putting the Ten Commandments in a judicial building does not violate the First Amendment. But it does open you up for an interesting dilemma. Because if we're going to have freedom of religion, and a Jewish person wants to come in and put some symbolic symbol there, maybe the Torah or something, how would you be able to reject that? And you've got the Muslims that want to bring in the Quran, and you've got all these different, sects. They want to do this, they want to do that. You're going to have to build another wing on the building just for all the religious symbols. And if there are any atheists that have any brains, they'll go, our part of the building is all that part that doesn't have religious symbols, so we win. So, the purpose of the First Amendment is to prevent an establishment of a given religion. This is the only correct one. Nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. All rights are individual rights. That's the only kind there are. There's no such thing as community rights. We all start out as individuals and we come together as a community. Do you have more rights or less rights because you're sitting here in a room full of people? The same amount of rights. We don't start with a great big ball of community and then shave off little slivers of individual. The only kind of rights that exist are individual rights. Religion is an individual right. So you have a right to pray anywhere you want. Now, if you have a school, now you've kind of crossed the lines. You've blurred that individual thing. But we've got government in school and God in school, and we're getting ready to throw God out of the schools? Why would you do that? Let's throw the government out of the schools because they're not supposed to be there anyway. Let's have all private schools. You have a Catholic school, a Protestant school, a Jewish school, a Muslim school, an atheist school, whatever. And you set the rules for your school. You want to pray in your school? Go ahead, it's your school. Throw the government out. We have a right to free speech. And we say that so casually. Why? Why do we have and need the right to free speech? So we can cheer for those Cowboys? Hey, you see that football game the other day?
That's part of it.
It was really a rhetorical question. We don't have freedom of religion so that we can discuss, well, it is so we can discuss literature, but primarily it is so that we can badmouth the government. We have a right to alter or abolish the government. If I wanted to alter the government, now I know that's a really strange hypothetical because we all know the government is perfect just the way it is. But hypothetically, if I wanted to change it, let me assume hypothetically that I thought taxes were too high. That giving, my federal, state, and FICA taxes total 48%, and I'm just not crazy about giving half of what I make to the government. How would I go about changing it? What would be the first step? How about getting behind a podium and going, ladies and gentlemen, I think taxes are too high. Are you with me? We need to get consensus so that we, the people, can go in and make changes to the government. Freedom of speech is primarily freedom of political speech. And when George Bush says, you're either with us or you're against us, the Alien and Sedition Act prevented people from saying anything bad about the government. If you go to a Republican rally with an anti-George Bush t-shirt, you get handcuffed and escorted out by the Secret Service. What was the defining characteristic of Stalinism? Suppressing political dissent. You're either with us or you're against us. This is chilling. When I was running for president, I went to a university, and they had me speaking in this auditorium. It was a beautiful auditorium. 300, 350 seats. It looked like it had just recently been built. Beautiful facility. And I had 12 people in the first row. I thought, well, this is really silly. I got this, I'm echoing throughout the auditorium. I said, let's go across the hall. We've got a classroom. We can sit closer. We can see each other, face to face. Talk a little bit more informally. Nope, can't do that. You're a political candidate, presidential candidate. You have to be in the auditorium because the auditorium is a free speech zone. I almost fell off the stage. I said, what about the hallway? What about the rest of the campus? No, that's a speech-free zone. And I will tell you exactly what I told those students. Anywhere I happen to be standing is a free speech zone. The government doesn't tell me what I can or cannot say. The government doesn't tell me where I can or cannot say it. I have freedom of speech because none of you are big enough to shut me up. That's why I have freedom of speech. And when we hear someone who's being sexist or racist or homophobic standing on a soapbox, we go, oh my gosh, person is sexist, they're racist, they're homophobic. We got to get the government to drag them down off their soapbox. Wrong. If you violate or allow the government to violate somebody else's freedom of speech, what does that mean about your speech? You got to get a permit.
Privilege.
It's a privilege. And after I heard that, free speech zone was kind of that phrase, I was listening, I heard something on TV and I turned, and at the Democratic Convention in Boston that year, they had a free speech zone 2 miles away from the convention. It was a chain link fence surrounded by razor wire. Does that sound like a free speech zone to you? Oh, look, Mom, Auschwitz, another free speech zone. And they wanted me to go to the Republican convention. They had a rally out in Central Park. I said, okay. And they're going to have a bunch of people there. Okay, yeah, I kind of figured that. Well, we don't know if you want to go or not. Why? Well, because the Libertarian Party in New York City didn't get a permit. I went, so? So well, we thought you might be worried about getting arrested. I'm willing to lay down my life, liberty or death, and you think I'm worried about a silly permit? Wake up! Freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Do we have freedom of the press? Freedom of the media in this country? With every, ABC, NBC, I mean, they're like rubber stamped. They look like little robotic dolls telling you exactly the same story. If the only place you get your news is from television, you are living under a rock. We have a right to peaceably assemble. You don't need permits. And you also, and this is important, have a right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. What does that mean in 2007? Means that you can file a lawsuit against the government. Philosophically, does the government have a right to violate your rights? No, it's a non sequitur. So, if they do, hypothetically, the government accidentally steps on your political toes, then what? Well, then you can file a lawsuit against the government and presumably win. Of course, in our court systems today, the government claims to have sovereign immunity. You can't file a lawsuit against us because we're sovereign. No, we are sovereign. You have privileges. And I ought to throw you in jail just for asserting the idea that you had sovereign immunity. This is Illinois. Has anybody here heard of the Second Amendment? Or have they just like completely deleted that?
Pretty close.
There's I'm genuinely pleased, they've created a First Amendment museum over at the Tribune building in Chicago. Tribune, freedom of the press, First Amendment. I could not wait. I still haven't been there. I want to go to the First Amendment Museum and go, this is wonderful. I was a presidential candidate. I wrote a book all about... You know what we ought to do? We ought to take the next floor down and turn it into the Second Amendment Museum. You know how many people would have heart attacks in Illinois? This is incredible. Now, let me very quickly go through some of the fallacies. Most people will say a well-regulated militia means the National Guard. That is totally, completely untrue. The Bill of Rights was ratified in 1791. Second Amendment was among them. If well-regulated militia means the National Guard, and the National Guard didn't show up until the early 1900s, it means that A, the Founding Fathers were omniscient and able to predict the future, and B, the Second Amendment didn't mean anything for 100 years. They talk about sporting uses. The Second Amendment is not about hunting, unless, of course, you're hunting members of Congress. The most important reason for the people to keep and bear arms is to protect themselves against tyranny in government. Your government. Is it possible for governments to get out of control? Think 1940s.
Think Waco, Texas.
Think Waco, Texas. When the government gets out of control, what are you going to do about it? Read about it in the paper? Oh, look, dear. They drove an army tank through a church in Waco, Texas. Would you like another cup of coffee? Where's the outrage? We're just going to let that happen? Let's do something even, more recent. We had a hurricane come into New Orleans. There are people on television throwing rocks through windows. They are looting. They are killing. They show videotape of police officers walking through Walmart with the grocery cart. And they're supposed to be maintaining law and order? And they are the ones doing the looting? A, if you're still in New Orleans when the hurricane comes, you're an idiot. I mean, you only had 7 days notice. But assuming that you are still in New Orleans, are we going to protect you? No, we're going to send in the National Guard, and we're going to go door to door doing house-to-house searches. And for all those elderly ladies that are trying to protect themselves against the murderers in the street, your government is going to take their guns away. That's abominable. That's unconscionable. No one will ever take my guns away. Not while I'm able to breathe. I went to a college in Rhode Island. And it's very, very liberal there, more liberal than most. And I'm answering questions, and they're listening politely because, you know, I was a presidential candidate. One lady raises her hand and goes, "Excuse me, don't you think guns are dangerous?" Well, no. If I thought guns are dangerous, I wouldn't have a closet full of them. Well, couldn't we vote to take your guns away? Yeah. Absolutely. Unanimous vote. Michael is crazy, Michael is dangerous, and you're going to vote to take my guns away. You can do that. But then you're going to have another vote to decide which of you is going to come and take my guns. And that is not a vote I recommend you win. If you think the only determination of the Second Amendment is the opinion of the Supreme Court, then I invite you to be the person standing out in front of my door the day the government comes to take my guns. Because you're going to discover that my interpretation of the Second Amendment is the only one that counts. And we are getting to a point, ladies and gentlemen, in our society where the fabric of society is very, very fragile. If we have another terrorist event, we've already got the Patriot Act, we've already got the Military Commissions Act, we've already got the Real ID Act. If you don't realize that another terrorist attack is very likely to establish martial law, which means we're not even pretending that we have a constitution. This country is going to be in civil war.
Like they did with the Reichstag in Germany.
Just like, yes, they burned down the Reichstag, and we found out years later that Hitler's guys did that themselves. So, if you love your life, if you want to be able to protect that life, don't wait to call 911. You dial 911 and call for a pizza. The pizza will probably arrive first. So, the Third Amendment. The Third Amendment is all about property. It's probably never going to be used anymore. It says that no soldier shall, in times of war, peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner. So, who has control over the situation? The owner. And what is it that they own? Property. Property, property, property. It's all about property. Who owned the 13 colonies prior to the American Revolution?
King of England.
King of England. Who owned the colonies after the American Revolution? We did. It's ours. The entire American Revolution was all about property. Why did we fight the Alamo? Because Santa Anna had said, we're going to do this Constitution, we're going to let you own the property. Oops, changed our mind. We're just going to renege on that Constitution. And so the people at the Alamo were from all over. There were a lot of Mexicans, and they fought under the Mexican flag for property. If you won't fight for your property, what will you fight for? When is it appropriate to say, no, damn it, the government is wrong? So our army is so modern and so mechanized, they're probably not going to need your little house anymore. The Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment is all about privacy. Is anybody able to recite the Fourth Amendment? The right of the people, individual rights, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. What is your person? property. What are your papers? Property. What are your houses? Property. What are your effects? More property. You have a right to all of your property. The government cannot come in and do a cavity search and invade your property against unreasonable searches and seizures. Unreasonable being the key word. So the government is not allowed to do unreasonable searches and seizures. What would the definition of a reasonable search be?
Probable cause.
What's that?
Probable cause.
They have to have probable cause. No warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. They have to have a warrant. Now, there were, prior to the Bill of Rights, the king would give the soldiers general warrants. A general warrant is a piece of paper that said that you're allowed to search anywhere, anytime, anybody, for anything. We're going to come in and we're going to look. We're looking for contraband. What are you looking for? I don't know. I'll recognize it when I see it. Oh, wow. 50-year-old bottle of wine. Hey, that's contraband, isn't it? Yeah, thanks. We're not going to send you to jail. We're just going to confiscate this expensive bottle of wine. That's how a general warrant was used. But with the Fourth Amendment, they have to have probable cause. So the police officer, whoever is going to get the warrant, they go to the judge, says, Judge, we're going to go and we're going to search for drugs. Why? Well, I think that they have just think. You just think. You have to have probable cause. We have to be the house has been under surveillance. We've been watching them carry on all this stuff. They're taking in all this acetone, and unless you have a lot of painting to do, you're probably making methamphetamines or something like that. We've got all this evidence, and Your Honor, I swear they're doing drugs in this house. So the warrant has to be supported by oath or affirmation. Somebody from the government has to put their butt and their reputation on the line. I'm willing to take responsibility and liability for this warrant. Okay, here's your warrant. So now they come in 2 o'clock in the morning, they kick down the door, they get the family up in their underwear, standing in the living room, and we start searching the house, tearing the sheets off the bed, going through the underwear drawer, those favorite ones that you have, they're doing all this stuff, looking, oh, we found your Playboy magazines. And they, we tore the house apart and there are no drugs. Have they violated your rights?
Absolutely.
Yes, they violated your rights. There were no drugs. In fact, we got the wrong house. It wasn't 4144, it was 4441, and it's like next door, and, sorry about that. There's a draft because we knocked the door off the hinges. Has the government violated your rights? Yes. So what are you going to do about it? Now you go back to the First Amendment and your right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. You have a right to file a lawsuit against the government. Everybody in the government? No. Just the wingnut stupid enough to sign an oath to get the warrant. Officer Smith, you were the one that had probable cause. You were the one that put your reputation, your butt on the line when you swore this oath. Therefore, you are going to jail. We're going to take your house and property and sell it to compensate the victims of this. We need to have some sort of negative retribution when the government gets out of control. If we don't, what would prevent them from doing this again? It protects you and it forces the government to follow certain procedures. Well, that was true back in 1791. Now that we've had the Patriot Act, The Patriot Act completely eliminates the Fourth Amendment. The Patriot Act says that the government, terrorism, you know how bad terrorism is. I mean, it's just getting worse and worse. And oh my God, national security. We're going to protect you. The government's job is to protect you. So we're just going to whip out these warrants, and we're going to do sneak and peek searches. Instead of coming in and tearing up the furniture and dumping the drawers out onto the floor, now we're going to come in. We're going to come in with latex gloves. We're going to take photographs of everything. We're going to make a copy of your hard drive. We're going to know everything that's in your apartment, and we're going to leave, leaving everything exactly the way it was. And you're going to come home from work. You're not even going to know that anybody was there. Everything is still neat and clean. And the government is going to let you know 3 months later. There's got a 90-day period where they have to notify you that we searched. You think they're going to give you a notice? If they come in and you haven't complained, if you haven't gone, did you move the bundle of mail on the table? Who left the TV on CNN? I never watched CNN. If you don't complain, if you don't notice that somebody has been in your house, the government is never going to tell you. The Patriot Act is egregiously unconstitutional. The Fifth Amendment. We were playing our game last night at the hospitality thing. We had a wheel. You know, people would spin the dial, and it would come up on 5, and everybody would just go, oh. And everybody knows I have a right not to incriminate myself. I can keep my mouth shut. Well, that means that you've gotten all of your information about the Bill of Rights from Law and Order. You have a right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Yeah. That is not the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment is the largest, longest of the amendments, 187 words, and it's filled with lots and lots of good information. Fifth Amendment says, no person shall be held to answer for any capital or otherwise infamous crime. They can't put you in jail unless on presentment or indictment by a grand jury. We think that you've committed murder. I'm like 98% certain that you've committed murder. But can I put you in handcuffs? Can I take you to jail? Not yet. I need a grand jury indictment, or a presentment means we physically bring you in front of the grand jury, which I don't think that happens very much. It might. But if you watch Law and Order, frequently they'll have the corrupt businessman, and they come in and they're asking him about the murder, and you know, because you watched the very beginning part during the trailer, that the guy committed murder. So you know that he did, and the police officers think that he did. But they're there in the office and going, well, we think, you know, and he's going, yeah, you know, you got nothing. If you had anything, you'd be taking me off to jail right now. But you got nothing. And the police officer says, before I, die, I'm going to see you in jail, that kind of thing. And so you go through the movie and they're collecting the evidence, and they always do the DNA test, and 15 minutes later they get the results back, right? And they finally, at the end of the movie, they go in because now they have the grand jury indictment. And the guy is usually in front of a big business meeting about to, make $1 million deal. And they walk in and they handcuff him and walk him out. And oh my gosh, it's all embarrassing. Why did they handcuff him at the beginning? Because there was no indictment. The grand jury is made of we the people. Before you can put somebody in jail, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime until you go to the grand jury and you give the grand jury a sub-box of evidence. It doesn't prove that you're guilty. It doesn't prove that you did it, but it gives enough evidence where this is worth a try. We're going to look into this. This is suspicious enough that we're going to pull people together and go in and do some more search warrants. So they can't hold you until that time. Now, is that for everybody? No. unless on presentment or indictment by a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual time of war or public danger. If you're in the military, if you're a soldier or a sailor and you do something bad, do you go to court? Where do you go?
Court-martial.
Court-martial. Civilians and military are viewed differently. Military, we give you guns. We're training you how to kill people. And so the rules are going to be different. If you're a civilian, you have to have an indictment by the grand jury. If you're a sailor or a soldier or in the militia pretending to be a soldier, then we go and put you to in a court-martial, which is all based under martial, or not martial law, admiralty law. The Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's a different set of rules.
Is the military all the time and the militias only in time of war?
Yes.
Because we're all in the militia, so.
We are all in the militia, and the militia is only in time of war. Now, in my 8-hour class, I go into how long we're supposed to have the military. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 13 says that you can raise money for an army, but no appropriation for that use shall be for a term longer than 2 years. So that's just food for thought. You know, come and take my Constitution class and we'll talk about that some more. But the point is that you've got different rules of justice. So then the Fifth Amendment starts to get, interesting. You are protected against double jeopardy. You cannot be held for the same crime twice. Once the court finds you innocent, we can't take you back for that same crime. Because if I could, let's say I accuse you, we go to court, and it costs you $10,000 to defend yourself. And the jury finds you innocent. And I'm just really frustrated. So I take you to court again. It takes you another $10,000 to defend yourself. And you're innocent, and I take you back, and you're innocent a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time. You're out $50,000. And you're still innocent. The whole idea is that we're going to do it right once. And then, if, you're not going to be able to be taken to court for that same crime. Now, if we take you to court accused of murdering George and you are innocent, that doesn't mean that you can go out and just arbitrarily kill people because you've already been tried of murder and no, we accused you of murdering George. If somebody else accuses you of murdering Sam, we can take you to court for that. That's a different crime.
What about federal income taxes?
Well, we can get into that. That's the 16th Amendment, and we're only going up to 10.
Thanks, class.
But I think it refers, it's the long way to the Second Amendment. And also the Fourth Amendment. So the Fifth Amendment says that you can't do double jeopardy. Then we get to the statement that says, nor be compelled to be a witness against himself in any capital, I forget, there's a clause there talking about the capital crimes. But you don't have to, you may be guilty, you did it, but you don't have to help. You don't have to confess. Now, on all these television shows, where they say, they read you your rights, that's the Miranda. They say that you're Mirandizing somebody, because in 1967, I think, there was this Mexican guy who confessed. And then they said, well, he didn't know that he didn't have to. And he got off. He was guilty. He did it. But they dropped the case because he didn't know. And so to prevent that from happening anymore, now we make sure that you know. We tell you that you have a right to remain silent. Just in case you didn't know. But if the government has to read you your rights, you haven't been studying hard enough. You need to have the Bill of Rights memorized. When I get stopped, no, you don't have to read me my rights. I know my rights much better than you do. And within usually half an hour, They know that, and suddenly they're very, very afraid. One that is very, very important. The Declaration of Independence says you have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness is abstract. What is that? Well, the original clause said life, liberty, and property, because it's all about property. But as they were talking about it, Benjamin Franklin argued that you have a right to be in love, right? Can you put love in a bag? Can you give me like 5 pounds of love? No, it's an abstract. And so Benjamin Franklin changed the word property to pursuit of happiness. It's supposed to include property and then oh so much more. Unfortunately, I think it has confused the issue these days. But the Fifth Amendment goes back to life, liberty, and property. It says you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Now the question is, what is due process of law? We drag you in the court and the judge goes, guilty. Is that due process? If you get dragged into admiralty court and the judge says, you know, I'll tell you what the law is. Guilty. Is that due process? Well, due process, if you look at Article 3, the Supreme Court has jurisdiction under common law, equity law, and admiralty law. Due process would include common law, and there are no common law courts available anymore. So it's almost impossible in today's day and age to get due process. But the amendment does say you cannot have your life or your liberty or your property taken away from you until we've had due process of law. So when I got pulled over, the police officers were planning to call a tow truck and impound my car. And so I told them, you're violating or about to violate my Fifth Amendment rights. No, sir, we would never violate your Fifth Amendment rights. I said, well, it sounds like it to me. You're going to deprive me of my property, and our conversation is not due process of law. And he goes, oh, and he started thinking about that. And I said, if you persist and impound my car anyway, I will file a lawsuit against you, and it's going to take me 6 or 12 months, but at the end of the year, I'm going to own your house and your car. Oh, don't get carried away, sir. And then they finally gave me my keys and, you know, let me go on my way. So it really does help if you know the Bill of Rights, and it also helps if you have the courage to back it up with a little bit of, you know, machismo there every once in a while. So, can't be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor can private property be taken for public use without just compensation. This is the clause that people point to. They said, see, the government has a right to eminent domain. No. Well, it says we can take private property for public use. But it says, but you can't do it without just compensation. Who decides just compensation? If I come into your store to buy something, do I look at it and go, I'll give you $1 for it? Maybe at a swap meet, but not at a store. There's a price on it. If you want it, that's the price you pay. This is my land. You want to build your freeway through it? Okay, I've got a price, but you're going to pay my price. You're not going to come along and condemn my property, and then when my property is, you know, getting 10 cents on the dollar, come along and buy my property for 10 cents on the dollar. It's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen because I'm a strong Second Amendment supporter. I don't have that little Alamo wall around my property, but that kind of gets in the way when I'm shooting back.
Well, the real problem with this is they're talking about not as public use anymore, but public benefit.
Right.
Which is the whole...
Well, again, they keep changing the rules. I don't know how many of you have ever read Animal Farm. The animals have got the rules on the side of the barn, and it says, you know, all animals are created equal, you know, and then as it goes on, it says, but some are more equal than others. That's what we're doing. I mean, Animal Farm was fiction. This is the United States. The government is going, some people are more equal than others. Our shopping mall is more important than the fact that this land has been in your family for generations. You know, somebody else is going to be paying us more taxes than you're paying. And so this is, you know, for the benefit of the government. The government has no intrinsic benefits. Why is the government here? The government is here for our benefit. And if it is not benefiting us, then we can alter or abolish it. They talk about, you know, state interest. The state has no interest. Get your interest out of my property. Your job is to be here to protect my life, my liberty, and my private property. And you're not doing it. Most of what our government does is unconstitutional. I'm outraged. Another clause, I'm going to go to the Constitution itself. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution tells Congress all the things they are allowed to do. We've got this list of things, and we're going to let you, those are your privileges. What do you think Article 1, Section 9 does? Tells Congress what they can't do. Shouldn't be necessary. If these are all the things on, your doctor puts you on a diet, and you can have salad, you can have tofu, you know, you can have those, you know, wonderfully tasty rice cakes. Do you come home and add, you know, German chocolate cake at the bottom? No, it wasn't on your menu. It wasn't on your diet. Well, we've given Congress a list of things they can do. Can they pencil in Social Security Administration? Can they add Department of Education just because, like, oh, we want people to be smart? No, you can't add responsibilities to your list. We the people do that. Anything not in Section 8 that government is doing is by definition unconstitutional. Article 9 explicitly tells them things they cannot do. And one of the things they cannot do is they cannot use bills of attainder. Bill of attainder was a piece of paper that said, you have committed a crime, you committed murder or whatever, we're going to take you out and burn you at the stake. But you've got this farm, all this property around. So, according to ancient custom, that property was attainted. You committed the murder, and so all of this property is kind of like poisoned with that crime. And so the government would originally take your property. You don't get a chance to leave it to your children. Your children have just lost their inheritance because you had committed some heinous act. The Constitution explicitly forbids the government from using bill of attainder. It says the government is not allowed to come and just grab onto your property when you were guilty. So we're going to change the words to eminent domain, and now the government can take your property and you're not guilty? Does that make any logical sense to anybody here? The government is here to protect your property, not to take it. And I don't care if you call it eminent domain, bills of attainder, or a shopping mall. If I own it, you're not going to get it. I don't care what the Supreme Court says. Now, the Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment guarantees to every person the right of a speedy and public trial. A speedy and public trial. So, why should a trial be speedy? Why do we want it to be a speedy trial? What was that?
It costs a lot of money.
Because it costs a lot of money. There's a more important reason.
So they can't put you in a gulag.
Yeah. Basically, you could be innocent. You didn't do it. So we're trying to avoid handcuffing you, putting you in jail. We leave you down in the dungeon for 5 years. Finally, because the wheels of justice move slowly, we drag you up out of the dungeon. We bring you out in front of the judge, and the witness goes, oh, that's not the person. That's not her. What happened to the 5 years that you just sat waiting for your trial? Can you ever get that time back? No. So anybody can file a lawsuit. You can be accused of anything, whether you're innocent or not. But there is a possibility that you're innocent. And the goal is to infringe upon your liberty as minimally as possible. We want to get this over and done with, because if you're innocent, you need to be allowed to go back and pursue happiness your way. Now, what about public? Why would you want the trial to be public? You know, you want everybody airing your dirty laundry out. You know, we're going to have you on television, and you're going to be going over why you were wearing that kind of a dress at that particular hour. You want to have a public listening to all that? Why is a trial supposed to be public?
Star chamber government.
To avoid star chambers. What is a star chamber?
Like the judge, jury, and executioner all in one.
That's right. We grab you, we take you behind closed doors, and we hear punching and ouching and chairs breaking and screaming and bamboo under the fingernails. And an hour later I come back and go, well, he's guilty. Now he's dead. Do you feel warm and secure that we've had swift justice? Does that make you feel good about your judicial system? How does that make you feel?
Terrible.
Why?
Because you didn't get due process.
Because you could be next. I mean, it's bad enough that the other guy is dead, but what's to distinguish him from me? Right now, we've got the Military Commissions Act. All the President or the Department of Defense has to do is label you an enemy combatant. You are an enemy combatant. Purple sweaters or enemy combatant day. And so you can be dragged off to Guantanamo Bay with no phone call, no lawyer, with no indictment for an indefinite period of time. Because you were an enemy combatant. Does that sound like freedom and liberty to you? Does that sound like a United States dedicated to freedom? That sounds like a third world country to me. That sounds like an excuse that we would give for sending our troops in and blowing up somebody else's buildings. We've got all these troops over in Iraq so we can have free and open elections. Hell, I'd love to have those troops come back so we can have free and open elections in the United States. But the idea is that we have speedy and public trials so the government doesn't get carried away. So the government doesn't go out and violate somebody else's rights. We, the people, are supposed to be watching each other and protecting each other from the government. And we get a notice in the mail, it's like, oh man, I got jury duty. Son of a... That was the weekend of my ball game. I'm going to go play softball. And so what? You say, oh, and you give your little written excuse, and they let you off the hook? Oh man. Whew. Man, this is the big playoff week too. How do you think the person who is on trial feels? There was a comedian that I used to listen to who said the thing that scares him the most is being tried by a jury of people too stupid to get off jury duty. I mean, I've been to some trials. I went to a trial in Pennsylvania. It was an IRS tax case. I am not exaggerating or elaborating. The jury was asleep. They didn't care. They deliberated for all of 30 minutes because it was a Friday and they wanted to get the hell out of there. You're guilty. I'm going home. Is that justice? Is that the kind of liberty and justice that you want? Imagine yourself accused of something that you are not guilty of. You are absolutely not guilty, but somebody's accused you of it. And now you have to defend yourself. And you got 12 people over there in the jury box dozing off. Rights and responsibilities are the same thing. They are opposite sides of the same coin. If you want freedom and liberty, if you want a fair trial, then you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to serve your jury duty with pride, because you can do jury nullification. You can sit there and pay attention and go, that's a stupid law. You go, yeah, but it's on paper. I don't care. It's a stupid law. I'm not going to send somebody to jail for parting their hair on the wrong side. It's a stupid law.
But don't mention jury nullification in front of the court, because they'll kick you out of there so fast and make your head spin.
Well, again, I teach an 8-hour class and we go into law, and people are usually, I mean, this is really an Alice in Wonderland aspect of our government. But we have the right to this jury trial. You have a right to the assistance of counsel for your defense. You have the assistance of counsel. Now, if someone is assisting you, who's in charge? You are. I'm the mechanic, and you're going to be my apprentice. You're going to be assisting me. Hammer, screwdriver, pliers. You're assisting me. I'm the one who's doing it. So you have the right to have someone assist you in your defense. So then who would be in charge of your defense? You are. Because you've memorized the Bill of Rights. You understand what your rights are. Who is going to defend your rights more passionately than you are? Nobody. So the court system will say, well, we'll assign you an attorney. That's not what I want. Assistance of counsel for my defense is not the same as a court-appointed attorney, because that just automatically puts me into your statutory system. If I go to, if I want to take a 5-year-old and enroll them in school, okay, I pick the school, I pick the teachers, I pick the classes that they're going to take. The 5-year-old doesn't do that. The 5-year-old is incompetent to do that. I do that. As soon as you hire an attorney, as far as the law is concerned, you are incompetent in the eyes of the law. You may as well be 5 years old, and the judge and your attorney are going to make your decisions for you. They're going to make decisions about your life because you are not capable of doing so. Property damaged. Police officer pulls you over, ask the police officer, is this a criminal case or a civil case? And if it's a criminal case, did I drive over a mailbox? Is there a dead pedestrian in the last crosswalk someplace? Where's the violation of property? And if there's no body, there's no destroyed property, then it must be a civil case. And if it is a civil case, there's got to be a contract involved. Got to be a contract. I'm sorry. Where's the contract? Is this your signature on the back of the driver's license? Yeah, well, there's the contract. You have contracted with the government to engage in commerce, and that contract requires you to follow all of their laws.
So in other words, if you really are driving without a driver's license, you're better off.
As far as I'm concerned. Which is why I do that. I don't have a driver's license. Anytime the government gives you permission, to do something, they let you know that you have permission by giving you a permit or a license. You get a concealed carry permit. You get a driver's license. Let me ask a few hypothetical questions. If you have a marriage license, what do you have permission to do now that you didn't have permission to do before? Who gave you that permission? And where did they get the authority to give you permission in the first place? Did Thomas Jefferson have a marriage license? No. George Washington, did he have a marriage license? No. So if they didn't have marriage licenses, and marriage licenses are ubiquitous today, that begs the question, where was the first marriage license issued? Where did marriage licenses start? Well, roughly 1850, just before the Civil War, we've got black people and white people living in the South. Can two white people live together and make babies? Sure, they're white. They have rights and they can do anything they want with their property. How about two black people? Can two black people live together and make babies? Well, I mean, they really had no control over where they lived. And if they had babies together, it was almost an accident. We considered it animal husbandry. Now think back to 1850. Can you have a white person and a black person? Can a white person and black person live together and make babies in 1850? Oh my God, don't even think about it. I mean, if we allow a mixing of the races, I mean, society will crumble. Life as we know it will come to an end. Won't it? No. You have white people and black people living together, Irish and Jewish, you name the combinations, and we've got families, the children are beautiful, everybody is happy. The world's not going to come to an end. Marriage licenses, if you look in Black's Law Dictionary, were privileges given by the state for people who intend to intermarry. So a black person only had privileges. A black person had to get permission to marry the white person. But that was so we could deny you permission. No, you can't marry the white person. Marriage licenses started out based on racial bigotry. The good news, of course, is that was 150 years ago. And we've gotten rid of those nasty marriage licenses for black people, haven't we? No. Now, instead of freeing the black people, now we've enslaved the white people. You went out and you asked the government for permission. Why? Did you ask me for permission? Did you call me and say, hey, I see this guy, I really like him, I'd like to go out with him? You know, want your permission? Did you ask your mother for permission? If your mother said, sweetheart, I'm not really happy about the person you're with, I think that you really need to terminate that relationship, would you go back and say, well, darling, I guess we have to, end it. Mama doesn't like you? Or would you tell Mama to take you off the Christmas list? If you won't let your mother determine who you live with, why would you ask the government for permission? We have gotten off on this tangent of just asking, that's the way we've always done it. No, it's not the way we've always done it. George Washington didn't do it that way. Thomas Jefferson didn't do it that way. And I sure as hell am not going to do it that way. I don't need the government's permission. I don't need the government's permission to get married. I don't need the government's permission to travel. I don't need the government's permission to keep and bear arms.
Except in Illinois.
I don't need the government's permission to keep and bear arms, period. Police officer in Illinois comes up to me and says, Mr. Badnarik, you're not allowed to carry a gun in Illinois. I'd like to have it, please. Certainly. As soon as you give me yours. You think the police officer is going to give me their gun? Probably not. And so I'm going to tell the officer, whatever logic, whatever excuse you're using to not give me your gun, I'm using the same excuse. It would be dangerous to be a police officer without a gun. It's even more dangerous to be an Illinois citizen without a gun because you got the Illinois police running around. There are two groups of people in the world. Those of us who believe that you have a right to life. You have a right to defend that life. And you have a right to use a firearm to defend that life if that's what you think is the best and most efficient way to do it. The other group of people think that guns are inherently dangerous. The only reason to buy a gun is because you're planning to commit murder or rob a bank. Or be a police officer, which these days is pretty much the same thing. Now, at this stage of the game, those two groups are having philosophical debates. As soon as it becomes more than a debate, my team wins. Because we got guns. I don't carry a gun on a regular basis anymore. I mean, the presidential campaign, the congressional campaign, it just kind of got out of the habit. But I do carry a gun. And if I am ever stopped by a police officer, you'll probably see me on the news, because I will not give up my gun to anybody. I don't give a flying flip what color costume you're wearing. I don't care what badge you have. You have no authority to do that. Does a police officer... How far are we going to allow our American government to go? We've already got the Patriot Act, which eliminates the 4th and 6th Amendment. We've already got the Military Commissions Act, which George Bush declares eliminates the right of habeas corpus. Habeas corpus is Latin for show me the body. If you get thrown in jail, your friends and your neighbors can file a writ of habeas corpus, and the government has to tell you which jail you're in. They got to tell us what you're accused of so we can start to, build your defense. And in many cases, we can actually get you out of jail. The Military Commissions Act eliminates the right of habeas corpus. Legally, in this country, the Secret Service can come in and take you out of your home at 2 o'clock in the morning and disappear you into the middle of the night. And we never hear from you again. Don't you think that's a little bit over the line? Doesn't that fill you with horror? And we sit here, reading the newspaper at breakfast, watching the news. Oh, my Cubs won today. Oh my gosh. You're worried about the Cubs? The 7th Amendment talks about in suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved. The most important words there, in suits at common law. Part of the 7th Amendment. Where can you find common law? Anybody have a phone number for a common law jurisdiction in Illinois or anywhere else in the United States? Common law is all about property. Common law is the Constitution. Common law jurisdiction is where the Bill of Rights actually means something. But we don't have common law in the United States anymore. My friend Rick Stanley in Colorado, holstered a gun, went and stood on the steps of the Capitol in Colorado, in Denver, and they arrested him. They took him to court. He did that deliberately. He and his lawyer were trying to defend the Second Amendment. And the judge says, you're not allowed to mention the Constitution in my court. You're not allowed to mention it in your voir dire. You're not allowed to ask questions about the Constitution. And you cannot mention the Constitution in your summary. Do you understand my instructions? I was really busy on the presidential campaign. Did Colorado secede from the Union when I wasn't looking? How can any judge in the United States declare that you're not allowed to mention the Constitution? The answer is because you're not in a constitutional jurisdiction to begin with. It is a statutory jurisdiction. It is extra-constitutional. The only thing missing are the kangaroos hopping around. You're guilty. We'll find a reason. Just, relax. I'm sure that we can have the lawyers draw up some paperwork. I don't know why you're guilty yet, but we'll come up with something. And most people don't know that because they work really hard to have a driver's license. They make sure they get their concealed carry permit because you don't want to go to court. Oh my gosh, I'm going to need a lawyer. Well, you just led yourself right into a statutory jurisdiction. You have no rights.
So what did he do?
What
did he do?
Oh, he went to jail. He went to jail for a long time, and was he standing on principle? Was he right philosophically? Yes. The problem was that he didn't know how to go about doing what he thought he was doing.
And that would have cost him money, and they're going to use people's money against him.
Yeah, and so he basically, he was standing on a railroad track holding up a copy of the Constitution. You want to know how much protection the Constitution will give you? Do that. When the diesel locomotive's coming, you just hold up a copy of the Constitution. And that's going to demonstrate just how much protection the Constitution is going to be. It's your job to protect the Constitution. The one thing, and only thing that I agree with George Bush, is that it's only a piece of paper. I don't have freedom of speech because they wrote the First Amendment. I have freedom of speech because you're not big enough to shut me up. I don't have a right to keep and bear arms because a couple of words someplace says I have the right to keep and bear arms. I have the right to keep and bear arms because I know that it's a dangerous world out there, and I will shoot and kill anybody that's trying to do the same to me. It's my responsibility. It's my life. They're my rights. And I know which ones I'm going to floss. The Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment is practically worthless. It says, unreasonable bail shall not be required, nor unreasonable fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. There is no definition for unreasonable. I know I personally was, on a traffic court, and they set, like a $5,000 fine. I thought that was unreasonable, but apparently the judge doesn't. They can set $1 million bail. And you're a plumber. You'll never be able to afford it. And well, may as well just throw you in the star chamber. So the Eighth Amendment is warm and fuzzy, but as far as I'm concerned, is practically worthless. The Ninth and 10th Amendments. If you're only going to memorize two, memorize these. The Ninth and 10th Amendments work like bookends. The Founding Fathers were really, really smart guys. They had studied the Greeks, the Romans. They had studied just about every democracy that had existed prior to 1776. They understood people. They understood that they were mortal, they understood that they were fallible, and they understood that there were flaws in the Constitution. So they set up to try to close the loopholes. The Ninth Amendment, they didn't write really well. It was kind of like the end of the day. They wanted to go home. So they're poorly worded as far as I'm concerned. But the Ninth Amendment says the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage other rights retained by the people. Enumeration, listing, numbering. Does the Bill of Rights say anything about your right to have children? No. Do you have a right to have children? Yeah. Does the Bill of Rights say anything about the right to travel? No. Do you have a right to travel? Yes. And so the Ninth Amendment basically says the Bill of Rights is not a comprehensive list. We don't have enough paper to write down all of the rights that you have. These were just some of the ones that we thought were most important. I don't agree with Alexander Hamilton a lot, but Alexander Hamilton says you really don't want a Bill of Rights. Why would you make a partial list? I know it sounds really, really crazy, but if you write a Bill of Rights, if you put a small modified list and add it to the Constitution, somebody down the line is going to come up with this really crazy idea that the Bill of Rights are the only rights that you have, and if it's not listed in the Bill of Rights, you can't do it. Hypothetical, huh? The 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment works in the opposite direction. Just because the 9th Amendment says that just because it's not written down doesn't mean you can't. The 10th Amendment says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to the United States by the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Well, that is a really, if I was an English teacher, that sentence, I mean, I would send it after school. Basically, what it means is that we, the people, are sovereign. We, the people, created the state governments. The state governments then created the federal government. We, the people, are on top. We are the source of all political power in the country. We can alter or abolish the federal government. Can we alter or abolish the state governments? You betcha. And in some cases, that probably ought to happen. Illinois ought to have another look at that Second Amendment and, get a grip. So, imagine we the people with like 100% of our rights. And because we want to organize stuff and, take care of the agriculture, we create a state government and we give the state government maybe 10% of our power. And the state governments get together and they take 10% of what they have, which is really 1% of our power, and give that to the federal government. Who has the authority in this situation? We the people with 90, the state governments with 9, or the federal government with 1? 1% of the power. If the Constitution was working the way that it was supposed to, asking you what city the federal government was in would be a radio trivia question. All right, we're here in WGN, and we got our daily, we're going to give away free tickets to the Blackhawks game if you can tell me what city the federal government is in. Oh, gosh, I used to know that. The federal government is supposed to be really, really small. Article 1, Section 4, Clause 3 says that Congress must convene at least once a year. Excuse me? Congress must convene at least once a year? Why would the Founding Fathers waste the time and ink to write that? If Congress was doing what Congress is supposed to do, they would be limited to Article 1, Section 8. We can create an army. Yeah, we've already done that. Well, we can create a navy. Well, we've done that too. We can control post offices and post roads. Well, okay, we'll build another one here, here, and here. What else? I guess it's time to go home. We, the people, are the source of all political power. We, the people, have rights, unalienable rights. You cannot give them away. Now you can sit and cower in terror because the government had a piece of paper that said, or you can stand up and defend your rights. It's our job. We have the rights. We also have the responsibility. And we, the people, have been shirking our responsibility. We're going to let somebody else do it. In fact, as a presidential candidate, the one phrase that I heard most often, you know what you ought to do? I ought to do. I ought to do this. I ought to do that. I ought to do something else. And I said, you ought to run for president yourself. You can run your campaign any way you want. This is my campaign. But, again, we the people have a great responsibility. Most of what our government does today is unconstitutional. I wish that our parents had stopped it and cleaned it up. I wish that our grandparents had put a halt to FDR and the New Deal. I wish that, people during the Civil War had paid more attention to the Constitution. I wish that I could live my life and pursue happiness by jumping out of perfectly good airplanes on weekends. But I can't. That was then. This is now. And it's now our responsibility to fix it. And I don't want our children and our grandchildren going, why didn't you do something? Why didn't you fight back while you still had a chance? At some point in time, I anticipate that I will be standing on a cloud somewhere, and Thomas Jefferson is going to come up to me, and he's going to look me in the eye and ask me, Michael, what did you do to fight for liberty? I am not going to stand there and say, well, I was really busy, I had a softball game to go to, and skydiving was just more important. If I ever meet Thomas Jefferson and look him in the eye, I'm going to be able to tell him I did everything I possibly humanly could think of. I ran for president, I ran for Congress, I had a radio program trying to light the fires of liberty. Hell, look at all the bullet holes. Liberty is our responsibility. The first step in defending your rights is to know your rights. Thank you so much for your time and your attention.